In this video, I'm going to walk you through how we can take a symbol that was placed in our schematic from one integrated library and then change the integrated library it's from. There are two cases that we're going to look at. The first case is if it has the same design item ID and the same pin assignment, but maybe there's something else different. Maybe this has updated information about the vendor or the URL, or maybe it's got a slightly better footprint associated with it. It still has the same design item ID and pin assignment in the new library. We just want to replace that component on the schematic from the old library with the component in the new library. The second case is we've got a part on the board from an old integrated library and we want it to be a different part. Yeah, it's still a resistor, but it's a different value maybe. Or still a capacitor, but a different value. We want that new component coming from the new integrated library. We'll look at how we do that. Now keep in mind that we don't have to make any changes to the schematic if we don't want to. If we're happy with the symbol and happy with the footprint, as long as we have the old integrated library on our computer and it's installed, we will have full access to the library information about that component. And so we never have to change the integrated library unless there's some improvement in the parts. Generally, we always want to use the latest version of the integrated library for each new board design. But as long as we keep the old legacy integrated libraries around, we can still use them tied to the old legacy schematics. So let's take a look at how we change the linkage of a symbol from an old integrated library into a new integrated library. When we created this schematic, we used the 07 library. And so all of these parts belong to the 07 library. If I double click on this capacitor and I look up its part information here under source, it says the 07 library. And it's got the symbol and it's got the footprint linked. I never have to change that part if I'm okay with its symbol and footprint. As long as I have installed the 07 integrated library, I can use the schematic, I can cut and paste pieces out, and I can push this into a new layout if I want to. No problem. Don't have to change. But if I've got a better footprint, for example, or if I have a better symbol, or if I have more information about the part in the new library, the new integrated library, and I want this part associated with the new integrated library, I can do that with a couple mouse clicks. So we double click. That opens up the component and property page. Here are the properties for this component. Here it is. Here's the design item ID for that part. It's in the source, the 07 library. As long as I'm using exactly the same design item ID name and the same pin assignment in the new library as the old library, all I have to do is say under source, hey, let's move that. Let's select the new source of the 08 library. And now it says, uh-oh, I've switched. What do you want to do? If it's the same design item ID and the same, which means basically the same part and the same pin configuration, I say clean, and then presto, it's got now the association with the new library. And if I close this out and I deselect, and here's our part. If I double click, opens up the window, and look, there it is. It's in the 08 library. And I can do that for any of these parts. But now suppose that we have a part that we have a different reference designator ID. For example, when I created these resistors, I didn't have a library entry for 50 ohms. When I double click on this part, we open it up and look, it says under design item ID, it's a 1 meg resistor. That's because we didn't have a 50 ohm resistor in our library, and so we kind of hacked it. We said, okay, we'll use that part, and all we're going to do is change the value of it, and we put that in the comment line. Well, in the new library, the 08, we actually have a 50 ohm resistor with all the information about it, and so I want to change that part out from the 07 library to use the new component in the 08 library. You know, I could do it the old-fashioned way. I could just delete this, grab the component from the 08 library, paste it in, and put it in there. Perfectly fine way of doing it. Or, here's a little trick. I say, okay, get that from the 08 library, and now I want to select which component I use. And so it's going to pull up all the components in the '08 library. This is what it was in the '07 library. These are all the components in the '08 library because I just selected it. And let's go find that resistor, the new one, that is 50 ohms. And here it is, 50 ohms. So I click and I highlight it. I say, okay, that's the one I want. And look, now that part, it's still the same part there, but it's been changed to be the a different design item ID in the '08 library. And I say, okay. And we're done. We can check out this one. Let's see, this is the 300 ohm reference designator in the '08. So that's going to be in the same library. That's going to be in the same design item ID. So I just select that. I say clean. It's in the '08 library. I've got the footprint. I say OK. And ignore that error. And so when I go back and I look at each of these, I'll grab this one. It's the '08 library. I grab this one. It's the '08 library. And as long as I have the '08 library available in components and the '07 library, I will have no problem linking the symbols and the footprints. So when we come over to Tools and we look at Footprint Manager, we say, hey, let's look at all of these components. Can we find the footprints? We highlight all of them. All of the various footprints are brought over here. We highlight all of these now, and then we say validate, so I'm doing them all at once, and look, there they go. And if it needed the footprint in the '08 library, it found it. If it needed it in the '07 library, it found it. But it's got the footprints for each and every one of these components. And so if you want to update the footprint for your parts, because there's a better footprint or it's a little bit different, then we can take this original schematic, we can substitute the symbol with a new component in a new integrated library, and all the information about that component will now be linked to the new library.